की जय। नित्य विश्व विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतनाम श्रील भक्ति वेदांत वामन गोसाई महाराज की जय। नित्य विश्व विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतनाम श्रील भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। विश्व विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतनाम श्रील भक्ति प्रज्ञान केशव गोसाई महाराज। नित्य विश्व विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शतनाम श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोसाई प्रभुपाद की जय। नित्य विश्व महाभागवत श्री गौर बाबाजी महाराज की जय। नित्य विश्व श्री सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। नित्य विश्व वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की जय। श्री रूप गौरी गुरु वर्ग की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल पददास रघुनाथ शारद गोसाई प्रभु की जय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गौर पार्षद वृंद की जय। नाम श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जय। सर्व विष्ट विराट गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज की जय। श्री मुन देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योग माया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्रीनिताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय राधिकाय प्रियात्मने श्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्त नारायणीति नामिने। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। गुरुवे गौरचन्द्राय राधिकाय तदालये कृष्णाय कृष्णभक्ताय तरभक्ताय नमो नमः। यं प्रव्रजन्तमनुपेतमपेतकृत्यं द्वैपायनो विरहकातर आजुहाव पुत्रेति तन्मयतया तरवो विनेदुस्तं सर्वभूत हृदया मुनिमानतोऽस्मि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। शृण्वतं स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तना हृदन्तस्तो ह्यभद्राणि वितुनोति सुहृत्सतम्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भागवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। तवैवास्मि न जीवामि त्वया विना इति विज्ञाय राधे त्वां नायमं चरणान्तिकम्। भक्त्या विहीना अपराधलक्षय क्षिप्ताष्टकामादितरङ्गमध्ये कृपामयि त्वं शरणं प्रपन्ना वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दम्। भज श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्तवृन्द। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Bol Raseshwari. So the glories of devotional service. So Devahuti, she asked 4 questions to her son Kapila Dev, who's Bhagavan himself. She said to her son, you can dispel this darkness. You can dispel the illusion of aham mimeti, of my false identification of I and mine. And explain about Jīva, the living entity, and prakṛtī, the material nature. And so then Kapila Dev, he explained Adhyatmika Yoga, which consists of Sankhya, Yoga, and Bhakti. And he explains how the pivotal role of the mind and he explains the pivotal role of the mind and the symptoms of a liberated mind. How the only auspicious path is Bhakti, which is attained by association of sadhus. And he explains the characteristics and activities of a sadhu. Sadhu's association can gradually lead one to prem. Practice of jnana and yoga is incomplete without bhakti. And now Devahuti, she's asking her next 4 questions. One second, let me just find this. Okay. So her next question number 2 is, what kind of bhakti should I perform to easily attain your feet? And then Kapila Dev explains Vairi Sadhan Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti in that chapter 25. And now Devahuti, her third question, is explain the gyan by which one understands the tattvas. And so then Kapila Devi answers that in this chapter 26 and also in chapter 27. And then Devahuti asks her 4th question, explain the yoga aimed at the Lord for liberation. How many limbs does it have? And that question is answered in chapter 28. So yeah, now we're going to be hearing the answer to what is gyan, by which one understands all the different tattvas. All right, so yesterday we read the benefits of hearing Sankhya, freedom from the modes, self-realization, and cutting the knot of attachment. And today we're reading about the Lord's interaction with prakṛtī is just a pastime by his will, and the Jiva's interaction with prakṛtī leads to his bondage. So prakṛtī is only meant to be enjoyed by Bhagavan. Devahuti asks Kapila Dev about bhakti, question 2, gyan, question 3, and yoga, question 4. And Kapila explained about bhakti in the previous chapter, and his mother was fully satisfied with that. Although bhakti is supreme, and without bhakti, karma, gyan, and yoga cannot give results of swarga or liberation, a person engaged in bhakti is also inquisitive about karma, gyan, and yoga. In chapter 26, Kapila will discuss Gyan, Sankhya. Answer to question 3. The manifestation and characteristics of the elements such as Mahatattva, the universal form, composed of those elements and is being brought to life by the entrance of the Lord. I will describe the different features of elements, knowing which I'll describe the different features of elements, knowing which one is freed from the influence of material modes, one attains perfection of self-realization, and it cuts the knot of attachment to the material world. Okay, where is it? The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Soul, and he has no beginning. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond the existence of this material world. He is perceivable everywhere because he is self-effulgent. I forgot to read the verse. I'll just finish reading this translation. It's not letting me scroll. I'll just read the Sanskrit then. Anadiratma puruṣa nirguna prakṛtī para Pratyagdharma swayam jyotir vishwamena samanvitam. Supreme Personality is a Supreme Soul, and he has no beginning. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond the existence of this material world. He is perceivable everywhere because he is self-effulgent, and by his self-effulgent luster, the entire creation is manifested. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described as being without beginning. He is puruṣa, the Supreme Spirit. Puruṣa means person. When we think of a person in our present experience, that person has a beginning. This means that he has taken birth and that there is a history from the beginning of his life. But the Lord is particularly mentioned here as anadi, beginningless. If we examine all persons, we will find that everyone has a beginning. But when we approach a person who has no beginning, he is the Supreme Person. That is a definition given in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parakrishna, first verse. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna, the Supreme Controller. He is without beginning, and he is the beginning of everyone. This definition is found in all Vedic literatures. The Lord is described as the soul, or spirit. What is the definition of spirit? Spirit is perceivable everywhere. Brahman means great. His greatness is perceived everywhere. And what is that greatness? Consciousness. We have personal experience of consciousness, for it is spread all over the body. In every hair follicle of our body, we can feel consciousness. This is individual consciousness. Similarly, there is super consciousness. The example can be given of a small light and the sunlight. The sunlight is perceived everywhere, even within the room or in the sky, but the small light is experienced within a specific limit. Similarly, our consciousness is perceived within a limit of our particular body, but the super consciousness, or the existence of God, is perceived everywhere. He is present everywhere by his energy. It is stated in the Vishnu Purana that whatever we find anywhere and everywhere is the distribution of the energy of the Supreme Lord. In Bhagavad Gita also, it is confirmed that the Lord is all-pervading and exists everywhere by his two kinds of energy, one spiritual and the other material. Both the spiritual and material energies are spread everywhere, and that is the proof of the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The existence of consciousness everywhere is not temporary. It is without beginning, and because it is without beginning, it is also without end. The theory of that consciousness develops at a certain stage of material combination. The theory that consciousness develops at a certain stage of material combination is not accepted herein, for the consciousness which exists everywhere is said to be without beginning. The materialistic or atheistic theory stating that there is no soul, that there is no God, and that consciousness is the result of a combination of matter is not acceptable. Matter is not beginningless. It has a beginning. As this material body has a beginning, the universal body does also. And as our material body has begun on the basis of our soul, the entire gigantic universal body has begun on the basis of the Supreme Soul. Our mental body has begun on the basis of our soul, and the entire gigantic universal body has begun on the basis of the Supreme Soul. The Vedanta Sutra says, Janma Dasya, that's the first verse of Srimad-Bhagavatam also. This entire material exhibition, its creation, its growth, its maintenance, and its dissolution is an emanation from the Supreme Person. In Bhagavad Gita also, the Lord says, I am the beginning, the source of birth of everything. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described here. He is not a temporary person, nor does he have a beginning. He is without cause, and he is the cause of all causes. Para means transcendental, beyond the creative energy. The Lord is the creator of the creative energy. We can see that there is a creative energy in the material world, but he is not under this energy. He is prakṛtī para, beyond this energy. He is not subjugated to the threefold miseries created by the material energy, because he is beyond it. The modes of material nature do not touch him. It is explained here, Swayam Jyoti. He is the light himself. We have experience in the material world of one light being a reflection of another, just as moonlight is a reflection of the sunlight. Sunlight is also the reflection of the Brahma-Jyoti. Similarly, Brahma-Jyoti, the spiritual effulgence, is a reflection of the body of the Supreme Lord. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Yasya Prabhavata. The Brahma-Jyoti, or Brahman effulgence, is due to his bodily luster. Therefore, it is said here, Swayam Jyoti. He himself is light. His light is distributed in different ways, as the Brahma-Jyoti, as sunlight and as moonlight. Bhagavad Gita confirms that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunlight, moonlight, or electricity. The Upanishads also confirm this. Because the bodily luster of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is sufficient to illuminate the spiritual world, there is no need of sunlight, moonlight, or any other light or electricity. This self-illumination also contradicts the theory that the Supreme Soul, or the spiritual consciousness, develops at a certain point in material combination. The term Swayam Jyoti indicates that there is no tinge of anything material or any material reaction. It is confirmed here that the concept of the Lord's all-pervasiveness is due to his illumination everywhere. We have experienced that the sun is situated in one place, but the sunlight is diffused all around for millions and millions of miles. That is our practical experience. Similarly, although the Supreme Light is situated in his personal abode, Vaikuntha or Vrindavan, his light is diffused not only in the spiritual world, but beyond that. In the material world also, that light is reflected by the sun globe, and the sunlight is reflected by the moon globe. Thus, although he is situated in his own abode, his light is distributed all over the spiritual and material worlds. The Brahma Samhita 537 confirms this. Goloka eva nivasatyak akilatma bhuto. He is living in Goloka, but still he is present all over the creation. He is the super soul of everything, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has innumerable transcendental qualities. It is also concluded that although he is undoubtedly a person, he is not a puruṣa of this material world. Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand that beyond this material world there can be a person. Therefore, they are impersonalists. But it is explained very nicely here that the personality of Godhead is beyond material existence. Sa esha prakṛtīṃ shukṣma daivim guna mayim vibhu yadrichayaiva pagatam abhyapadyata līlaya. As his pastime, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest of the great, accepted the subtle material energy, which is invested with three material modes of nature and which is related with Vishnu. Purport. In this verse, the word guna mayim is significant. Daivim means the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And gunamayim means invested with the three modes of material nature. Devim is the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and gunamayim means invested with the three modes of material nature. When the material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears, this gunamayim energy acts as a manifestation of the energies of the three modes. It acts as a covering. The energy emanated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests in two ways: as an emanation from the Supreme Lord and as a covering of the Lord's face. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that because the whole world is illusioned by the three modes of material nature, the common conditioned soul, being covered by such energy, cannot see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The example of a cloud is very nicely given. All of a sudden, there may appear a big cloud in the sky. This cloud is perceived in two ways. To the sun, the cloud is a creation of its energy, but to the ordinary common man, but to the ordinary common man in the conditioned state, it is a covering to the eyes. Because of the cloud, the sun cannot be seen. It is not that the sun is actually covered by the cloud. Only the vision of the ordinary being is covered. Similarly, although Maya cannot cover the Supreme Lord who is beyond Maya, the material energy covers the ordinary living entities. Those conditioned souls who are covered are individual living entities. And he from whose energy Maya is created is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In another place in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, in the first canto, 7th chapter, it is stated that Vyasadeva, by spiritual vision, saw the Supreme Lord and the material energy standing behind him. This indicates that material energy cannot cover the Lord, just as darkness cannot cover the sun. Darkness can cover a jurisdiction which is very insignificant in comparison to that of the sun. Darkness can cover a small cave, but not the open sky. Similarly, the covering capacity of the material energy is limited and cannot act on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is therefore called the Vibhu. As the appearance of a cloud is accepted by the sun, so the appearance of the material energy at a certain interval is accepted by the Lord. Although his material energy is utilized to create the material world, this does not mean that he is covered by that energy. Those who are covered by the material energy are called conditioned souls. The Lord accepts the material energy for his material pastimes in creation, maintenance, and dissolution. But the conditioned soul is covered. He cannot understand that beyond this material energy, there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the cause of all causes. Just as a less intelligent person cannot understand that beyond the covering of the clouds, there is bright sunshine. Gunar vichitra srijatim sarupa prakritim praja vilogya mohe sadya sa iha jnana guhaya. Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities, seeing this, are illusions by the knowledge-covering feature of the illusory energy. Let me just read it one more time. Divided into varieties by the three modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and living entities, seeing this, are illusions by the knowledge-covering feature of the illusory energy. Purport. Material energy has the power to cover knowledge, but this covering cannot be applied to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is applicable only to the praja, or those who are born with material bodies, the conditioned souls. The different kinds of living entities vary according to the modes of material nature, as explained in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literature. In Bhagavad Gita 7.12, it is very nicely explained that although the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance are born of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is not subject to them. In other words, the energy emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot act on him. It acts on the conditioned souls who are covered by the material energy. The Lord is the Father of all living entities because he impregnates material energy with the conditioned souls. Therefore, the conditioned souls get bodies created by the material energy, whereas the Father of the living entities is aloof from these three modes. It is stated in the previous verse that the material energy was accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in order that he might exhibit pastimes for the living entities who wanted to enjoy and lord over the material energy. This world was created through the material energy of the Lord for the so-called enjoyment of such living entities. Why this material world was created for the sufferings of the conditioned souls is a very intricate question. There is a hint in the previous verse in the word Lilaya, which means for the pastimes of the Lord. The Lord wants to rectify the enjoying temperament of the conditioned souls. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that no one is the enjoyer, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This material energy is created, therefore, for anyone who pretends to enjoy. An example can be cited here that there is no necessity for the government's creation of a separate police department. But because it is a fact that some of the citizens will not accept the state laws, a department to deal with criminals is necessary. There is no necessity, but at the same time there is a necessity. Similarly, there is no necessity to create this material world for the sufferings of the conditioned souls. But at the same time, there are certain living entities known as Nitya Pada, who are eternally conditioned. We can say that they have been conditioned from time immemorial, because no one can trace out when the living entity, the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, became rebellious against the supremacy of the Lord. It is a fact that there are two classes of men, those who are obedient to the laws of the Supreme Lord, and those who are atheists or agnostics, who do not accept the existence of the Lord and who want to create their own laws. They want to establish that everyone can create his own laws or his own religious path. Without tracing out the beginning of the existence of these two classes, we can take it for granted that some of the living entities revolted against the laws of the Lord. Such entities are called conditioned souls, for they are conditioned by the three modes of material nature. Therefore, the words gunar vichitra are used here. In this material world, there are 8,400,000 species of life. As spirit souls, they are all transcendental to this material world. Why then do they exhibit themselves in different stages of life? The answer is given here. They are under the spell of the three modes of material nature. Because they are created by the material energy, their bodies are made of material elements. Covered by the material body, the spiritual identity is lost, and therefore the word mamuhe is used here, indicating that they have forgotten their own spiritual identity. This forgetfulness of the spiritual identity is present in the jivas, or souls, who are conditioned, being subject to be covered by the energy of material nature. Jnana guhaya is another word used. Guha means covering. Because the knowledge of the minute conditioned souls is covered, they are exhibited in so many species of life. It is said in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 7th chapter, 1st canto, the living entities are illusioned by the material energy. In the Vedas also, it is stated that the eternal living entities are covered by different modes and that they are called tricolored, red, white, and blue living entities. Red is a representation of the mode of passion. White is a representation of the mode of goodness, and blue is a representation of the mode of ignorance. These modes of material nature belong to the material energy, and therefore the living entities under these different modes of material nature have different kinds of material bodies. Because they are forgetful of their spiritual identities, they think the material bodies to be themselves. To the conditioned soul, me means the material body. This is called moha, or bewilderment. It is repeatedly said in the Katha Upanishad that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never affected by the influence of material nature. It is rather the conditioned souls, are the minute infinitesimal parts and parcels of the Supreme who are affected by the influence of material nature and who appear in different bodies under the material modes. What time is it? 7:44. Okay, we're doing okay on time. Evam para vidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu puneratmani manyate. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Purport. The forgetful living entity can be compared to a man who is under the influence of disease and has become mad. Under the influence of a disease and has become mad, or to a man haunted by ghosts, who acts without control and yet thinks himself to be in control. Under the influence of material nature, the conditioned soul becomes absorbed in material consciousness. In this consciousness, whatever is done under the influence of the material energy is accepted by the conditioned soul as self-actuated. Actually, the soul in its purest state of existence should be in Krishna consciousness. When a person is not acting in Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be acting in material consciousness. Consciousness cannot be killed, for the symptom of the living entity is consciousness. The material consciousness simply has to be purified. One becomes liberated by accepting Krishna or the Supreme Lord as master, and one becomes liberated by accepting Krishna or the Supreme Lord as master, and by changing the mode of consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. Tarasya sangsutrir bandha paratantram chatat bhavatya karturishasya shakshina nirvatatmana. Material consciousness is the cause of one's Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditional life. Purport. The Mayavadi philosopher, who does not differentiate between the Supreme Spirit and the individual spirit, says that the conditional existence of the living entity is his lila, or pastime. But the word pastime implies employment in the activities of the Lord. The Mayavadis misuse the word and say that even if the living entity has become a stool-eating hog, he is also enjoying his pastimes. This is a most dangerous interpretation. Actually, the Supreme Lord is the leader and maintainer of all living entities. His pastimes are transcendental to any material activity. Such pastimes of the Lord cannot be dragged to the level of the conditional activities of the living entities. In conditional life, the living entity actually remains as if a captive in the hands of material energy. Whatever the material energy dictates, the conditioned soul does. He has no responsibility. He is simply the witness of the action, but he is forced to act in that way due to his offense in his eternal relationship with Krishna. Lord Krishna therefore says in Bhagavad Gita that Maya, his material energy, is so forceful that it is insurmountable. But if a living entity simply understands that his constitutional position is to serve Krishna, and he tries to act on this principle, then however conditioned he may be, the influence of Maya immediately vanishes. This is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter. Krishna takes charge of anyone who surrenders to him in helplessness, and thus the influence of Maya, or conditional life, is removed. The spirit soul is actually Satchidananda, eternal, full of bliss, and full of knowledge. Under the clutches of Maya, however, He suffers from continued birth, death, disease, and old age. One has to be serious to cure this condition of material existence and transfer himself to Krishna consciousness, for thus his long suffering may be mitigated without difficulty. In summary, the suffering of the conditioned soul is due to his attachments to material nature. This attachment should thus be transferred from matter to Krishna. Karya karana kartritve karana prakṛtīṃ vidu bhoktritve sukha dukkhanam puruṣam prakrite param. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when the Lord descends to this material world, he comes as a person by his own energy, Atma Maya. He is not forced by any superior energy. He comes by his own will, and this can be called his pastime, or lila. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body. The conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. That body is not received according to his own choice. In other words, a conditioned soul has no free choice. He has to accept a certain type of body according to his karma. But when there are bodily reactions as felt in happiness and distress, it is to be understood that the cause is the spirit soul himself. If he so desires, the spirit soul can change this conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but he can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. When he wants to engage in Krishna consciousness, a suitable body is offered to him by the internal potency of the spiritual energy of the Lord. And when he wants to satisfy his senses, a material body is offered. Thus it is his free choice to accept a spiritual body or a material body. But once the body is accepted, he has to enjoy or suffer the consequences. The Mayavadi philosopher's presentation is that the living entity enjoys his pastimes by accepting the body of a hog. This theory is not acceptable, however, because the word pastime implies voluntary acceptance for enjoyment. Therefore, this interpretation is most misleading. When there is enforced acceptance for suffering, it is not a pastime. The Lord's pastimes and the conditioned living entity's acceptance of karmic reaction are not on the same level. Devahutirvacha prakrite puruṣasyapi lakshanam puruṣottama bruhi karanayorasya sarasarcharya atmakam. Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Purport. Prakṛtī, our material nature, is connected with both the Supreme Lord and the living entities, just as a woman is connected with her husband as a wife and with her children as a mother. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he impregnates Mother Nature with children, living entities, and thereafter all species of living entities become manifest. The relationship of all living entities with material nature has been explained. Now, an understanding of the relationship between material nature and the Supreme Lord is sought by Devahuti. The product of that relationship is stated to be the manifest and unmanifest material world. The unmanifest material world is the subtle Mahat Tattva, and from that Mahat Tattva, the material manifestation has emerged. In the Vedic literatures, it is said that by the glance of the Supreme Lord, the total material energy is impregnated, and then everything is born of material nature. It is also confirmed in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that under his glance, Adhyakshina, under his direction and by his will, nature is working. It is not that nature works blindly. After understanding the position of the conditioned souls in relation to the material nature, Devahuti wanted to know how nature works under the direction of the Lord and what the relationship is between the material nature and the Lord. In other words, she wanted to learn the characteristics of the Supreme Lord in relation to the material nature. The relationship of the living entities with matter and that of the Supreme Lord with matter are certainly not on the same level. Although the Mayavadis may interpret it in that way. When it is said that the living entities are bewildered, the Mayavadi philosophers ascribe this bewilderment to the Supreme Lord. But that is not applicable. The Lord is never bewildered. That is the difference between personalists and impersonalists. Devahuti is not unintelligent. She has enough intelligence to understand that the living entities are not on the level of the Supreme Lord. Because the living entities are infinitesimal, they become bewildered or conditioned by material nature. But this does not mean that the Supreme Lord is also conditioned or bewildered. The difference between the conditioned soul and the Lord is that the Lord is the Lord, the master of the material nature, and he is therefore not subject to its control. He is controlled neither by spiritual nature nor by material nature. He is the supreme controller himself, and he cannot be compared to the ordinary living entities who are controlled by the laws of material nature. Two words used in this verse are Sat and Asat. The cosmic manifestation is Asat. It does not exist. But the material energy of the Supreme Lord is Sat, or ever existing. Material nature is ever existing in its subtle form as the energy of the Lord. But it sometimes manifests this non-existence. This material energy of the Lord sometimes manifests this non-existent or temporary existent nature, the cosmos. An analogy may be made with the father and mother. The mother and the father exist, but sometimes the mother begets children. Similarly, this cosmic manifestation, which comes from the unmanifest material nature of the Supreme Lord, sometimes appears and again disappears. But the material nature is ever existing, and the Lord is the supreme cause for both the subtle and gross manifestations of this material world. Okay, so I will end here for today. We'll do a little Mahamantra. And since Srimad-Bhagavatam is here, I'll play Mridanga. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Shri Guru Paramaham Giri Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ji ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ji ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashma Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shri Gurudev ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashma Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashma Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashma Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashma Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Mahabhagavat Shila Bhakti Shridas Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai. Nikhil Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Rupana Gauriya Guru Varga ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Padadashagadam Shara Gosai Prabhu ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramananda Hari Shri Gopal Sharada Vrinda ki Jai. Nama Chay Shri Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem se Gaur Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaur Mandal Braja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund ki Jai. Shri Amana Devi Kanda Devi ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Anantapati Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Samavata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Gaur. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki Jai. Krishna Bhakti Vedanta Siddhaya Namaha. Ancha Bhakti Vedanta Siddhaya Namaha. Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I need to anticipate this call. Okay, Hari Bol. See you tomorrow. Hari Bol Mahaprabhu.